All right. So, hi, Lauren. Thanks for joining us. If you want to just start off and tell us a little bit about yourself, like where you grew up and what your childhood was like.
Yeah, hey, I'm Loren. I've grown up in Portland. I've lived here my whole life. I still live like 5, 10 miles away from the hospital I was born in. But I always kind of had like a little interest in filmmaking. My father, he he's a grip in electric for a lot of big budget movies here that have been filmed in Portland, as well as TV shows. And he's worked in the industry for 40 years. So as a kid, I was always on movie sets, and my mom would drop me off or pick me up like on some crazy movie set. My dad would have to take care of me sometimes, and sometimes like the makeup ladies would take care of me. But always surrounded by that, and I never thought that it would be like a full-time career. I just saw it as this crazy thing my dad did, and he let me play with his cameras as I grew up. And before you knew it, I was able to start filming things that I liked, things that inspired me. Was mainly automotive. So the second my friends and I got driver's licenses, we were out driving cars, filming things, and even before that, riding bikes around the neighborhood and making videos of us doing dumb stuff, shooting off fireworks, like anything we could think of that would just be fun to film and watch later. So then I've been shooting for a long time now. Pretty much been in the automotive filmmaking industry for about 15 years, filming everything from drifting to drag racing, NASCAR, Formula One, just about every form of racing I can think of. So been all over the place.
Those film sets that your dad was working on early on. Do you remember? I guess you're probably too young to notice the films that are being made, or like, did you watch them later, or like, what kind of films were you watching as a younger child, and like, what were you kind of inspired by to think like I could do this myself?
Yeah, I mean, I was always very like amazed by the insane cameras that they had, the huge like build outs. And I just thought, I'd always think to myself, like, wow, who's the guy that gets to like touch that lens and push the record button on that camera? That is so cool. Some of the films I remember my dad talking about as a kid were one of the ones was Free Willy. Very obviously very famous. The Hunted is one that came to Portland. I was actually in a couple of like little commercials that were like local commercials. For one was for like a tire company. Actually, I think both of them were. And yeah, he's worked on tons of TV shows. If people know the TV show Grimm, was shot here for 5 or 6 years. That wasn't too long ago, but I was mostly into cartoons and stuff when I was little. But I do remember seeing some stuff and like looking for his name in the title and the credits at the end and being like so amazed if there was anything that said had his name in it. That was like the coolest thing ever.
And so, when was the first time you kind of picked up a camera? Was it to film your friends with your fireworks and stuff, and then kind of did it translate into filming like automotive, like driving around, maybe drifting? Like, what kind of first kind of things were you filming?
So I would say very first was I would like pirate like skate videos when I was in middle school, and I would learn to edit like on Adobe or not Adobe, like on Windows Movie Maker. And I would cut up the skateboard videos and edit them to like a different song. And then I remember I had like a digital still camera that my mom got me for Christmas or something. And I remember it fell off of the counter at one point and broke. And I was like so sad. And she bought me for the next Christmas like an actual little video camera that I was able to, shoot some whatever low resolution 480p something. And yeah, it went from there. My friends and I had like those motorized scooters, like those gasoline scooters, I think when we were like 13, 14 years old, and we would ride those all over the place. And I was trying to always think of ways to attach the camera to like the scooters or to like a skateboard so that we could follow each other around somehow with it and film a bunch of that stuff. But I got to be honest, a big inspiration for a lot of that stuff was the movie Jackass, and we were always trying to mimic some of the stupid stuff that we saw on there. Obviously, not as bad by any means, but doing lots of fun stuff like that on my remember on my summer vacation when we had summers off.
Cool. Yeah. Did you ever get like inspired by Jackass to like become a stunt man or anything, or you kind of more interested in the filming aspect?
Yeah, I don't think I think I was pretty afraid of being hurt, you know, so I was always a little more happier when it was my turn to like be behind the camera and film my friends doing something stupid. So I kind of just clung to that and tried to stay out of trouble the best I could. So um, yeah, I was more than happy to let them do the stunts and yeah, becoming a stuntman sounded like a cool idea, but it was never really anything that I was pushing towards.
And then how did you kind of turn this little hobby, I guess, into a career? Like, how did you first start making money, like filming some projects?
Yeah, so I had been seeing some videos online, probably Facebook, that some friends had sent me of cars, and it was basically like a static car parked like in a parking lot or somewhere cool, and then someone had filmed it like on rollerblades and made the video like really smooth, really like just really cool with good music. And I noticed just like all the cut points and everything so cinematic and it was shot really well. And I thought like, yeah, that was really cool. Like I want to do some stuff like that. That video is fun to watch, and I would watch those over and over again. So I started borrowing like my dad's bigger kind of like Sony camcorder thing and going to car shows because it was cheap to do. You could get into a car show for like 20 bucks. And I bought a set of rollerblades like secondhand from some store and went to the car show and filmed like a bunch of stuff going on, filmed people's cars at the show and like would post stuff online. And I noticed it was a really good way to get people's attention because everyone wanted their car filmed. Everyone wanted to see like a cool video of their car. So it was easy to kind of like get people interested in it because as soon as they saw me shooting, they would ask like, where can I see this? And I would tell them my name, whatever, my YouTube, and they would go look for it later on and show all their friends. And I think that kind of helped get the ball rolling, get like snowballing a little bit to get people watching what I was shooting. And then in like 2010, I went to a Formula Drift event with some friends that happened to be part of a car show that I was at. And I kind of got interested in like some of the drifting stuff. And some friends of mine told me there's local drifts all the time in Portland you can go to with us. And some of them were competing in the drifting. I didn't even really know much about it, but I would say that was kind of like a pinnacle moment when I started going to those drift events and filming some stuff because there was very little drift content on YouTube and nothing had really gotten saturated yet. So if you made a cool drifting video, it was easy to get traction because people were just like so amazed by some of the stuff people were doing. No one had seen it before. So that was back like 15 years ago.
And so how did you get like the access to those early drift events to like film? Did you kind of get a media pass, or like how what was your kind of technique?
Yeah, yeah, a lot of them were very grassroots, and someone kind of always knew someone. I would reach out to the track and say, "Hey, I want to film some stuff," and they were always very happy to have people out there. This was like the dawn of like the Canon 5D, and so affordable film equipment wasn't really something a lot of people had access to. But I remember my dad got kind of excited about it, and he was like, we should rent a 5D, and you can go out there and shoot that drifting whatever that grassroots drift thing, and see how it goes." I think he just loved to watch me go out there and like share a passion with him. He was always kind of a like a hobbyist shooter too as well. Like he did grip and electric on a lot of the big movies, but he also worked kind of like on the side doing side gigs with filming and editing as well. And so I remember I showed up to the very first drift event that I was planning on shooting, and they gave me the media vest and gave me the whole rundown, you know, like here's what you got to do, what you got to be careful for. And I remember asking my friend, I was like, so what is the competition? And he said, there's no competition. It's just a bunch of friends out here just driving, drifting as much as they can. And I was a little bit like bummed because I wanted to tell some kind of story. But once I started seeing like the camaraderie and like how much fun everyone was having, what they were doing with these cars and things breaking and these guys zip tying them together and stuff, it actually got pretty exciting, and that became a story of what to tell of kind of these trials and tribulations of these broke drifters, trying to have as much and as many laps as they possibly could.
You started filming drifting, and then what you were using like the Canon 5D, and then did you kind of progress and meet new people at the track, and like how did you kind of like start getting paid because you're going there as media? Were you doing like little jobs different here and there? Like how do you kind of sustain, filming?
I don't know why, but I became kind of like obsessed with the drifting scene, and it was just something that seemed so exciting and so easy to access. So um, my friends and I started driving further and further away, driving to Seattle, going places, and I would shoot different events like all over like the Pacific Northwest. So um, kept going to those, and then eventually somebody was like, have you shot about shooting like the premier drift series, Formula Drift? And I just was like, that seems like too much. That seems so like so professional. We're just a bunch of kids out here doing whatever. But a friend of mine who is also a filmmaker that I had met through this whole drifting thing, his name was Abbott Wilkerson. His brother had gotten his pro license, and he was like, we're going to go to Long Beach and shoot in the pro series. And I was just like, wow, like that's a big deal. And I remember seeing all the stuff on Facebook or Instagram of all the stuff they were doing down there in the pro series. And I was like, oh my gosh, how do I get there? And I just kept shooting and shooting just nonstop, whichever events I could get to. And eventually an online magazine called Can I Beat reached out to me, and they said, hey, we saw some of your drift videos. We're a sponsor of Formula D. Would you be interested in shooting for the rest of the year at the Formula D event? So there was 3 events left. And I said, yeah, I'll just go out there and shoot it. And that was basically my access to get a pass to shoot Formula Drift, because they wouldn't just give it to anyone. You had to have some kind of driver or some kind of sponsor basically vouch for you. And so I went and shot those last 3 events, and it's pretty amazing how quickly you start to like network with people. People see the videos, and they started asking like, hey, is there any way you can like send me some footage? I'll buy something from you. I'll put your name out there, I'll tag you, whatever. And so I quickly kind of made like a small network of drivers who were usually some of the lesser drivers, some of the drivers that didn't already have like a big budget or something. And so I kind of just talked to people throughout the off season, and I met a guy named Justin Pollock who was basically full ride sponsored by Falcon, and he brought me to the entire race, like all 7 of the events. The year after that, we basically figured out like a little deal. He was going to pay me a couple $100 and pay for my hotel room, but he flew me to every single event in 2011. And that was kind of like my first like foothold in the series. And from there, I just kept making more and more networks and meeting people. And I mean, it really all just kind of comes back to just trying to shoot as much as you possibly can and put out as cool of the stuff as you possibly can. And people noticed. So that was kind of what I just stuck with.
And so would you own the footage like that you were filming, and then you were able to license it to different outlets, or like you were selling it to the drivers, or like, and then once you were brought on by this other guy, like would he own the footage, or like how were you kind of licensing things?
Yeah, it's always kind of been like a little bit of a gray area, because like they're paying me to go, they're paying me to be there. But I think most of them were just so happy that I was there and providing footage for them. Quite a few times I got reached out to by like their sponsor, a different sponsor, like a wheel sponsor, and them asking me, hey, can I buy some of that Justin Pollock footage? And I would go to Justin and say like, is it cool if I, if I sell this to them or something? And he's like, yeah, 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 just whatever. Like, I want you to make some money off of this too, so that you're happy and you're comfortable. And just about every single driver I've worked for was kind of the same mentality. And they want to help me, make a living off of it as well, so that I could succeed and be there the next year for them to shoot more stuff.
Yeah, because sometimes it can get kind of, yeah, like tricky if it's like you're selling the competition, like if it's the competitor and you're there for somebody else, or if there's some kind of clash. But yeah, it is hard to kind of sustain yourself if they like limit you and you can't really sell the footage. So, but yeah, it's
And then Formula Drift would make us sign stuff too that said we can use anything you shoot, anything you post online, we can rip it and use it like in our trailers or live stream or anything like that. So it's kind of just like, it is what it is. Like, I guess that's part of being here. I was just happy enough because I knew that some other series like NASCAR won't let you film whatsoever, stuff like that. So it was nice to have the freedom.
yeah, it's interesting how like they've been set up, I guess, over the years, especially with like phone footage nowadays. Like everyone's got a phone and everyone's filming, but I think they limit like the lenses. Like you can't have a super long lens. Like when you go to the baseball or whatever, they kind of like
Yep.
look at the lenses. So they're trying to limit it still. But yeah, we'll see. The phones are getting so good that you can't even tell the difference sometimes.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah, yeah.
Crazy. So you were kind of progressing like that, working for drivers. Like, did you get any like bigger sponsors, or you constantly working, putting content on your YouTube channel originally?
Yeah, so I was going to each round for a few years, and I would shoot some stuff for a couple drivers, make them videos, and I would also make just kind of like a fun video that had every driver involved, which was literally just whatever direction I felt like pointing the camera, whatever music I felt like putting on it, and just editing that into kind of like a little highlight piece. And I had a driver ask me, he was like, what are you doing here? Like your videos are so random. I don't really understand them. And I had no response. I don't know. I just did whatever I felt like. And he said, you should try to tell a story, and I had always kind of thought that, but drifting just kind of seemed so random to me. I never really took the time or the effort to actually tell a story. So then I started like interviewing drivers more and talking to them on camera more, and kind of getting involved in some of that like behind the scenes things that were going on, and adding that to the videos and kind of trying to tell like a linear story of what was happening throughout the weekend. And that definitely helped propel me to shoot more and more videos and things that were like recaps. That happened pretty early on, but I remember um, the pivotal moment of making good money and actually having a career out of it was when I made a contact with one of the tire companies, and a guy named Paul, he hired me to shoot for Hankook. And from then on, the money was actually decent enough that I was actually, making a decent profit, that it seemed like a career at that point. We were talking a couple thousands rather than a couple hundreds. So um, yeah, at that point, I felt like it was something worthwhile finally.
Nice. And then, so you were start when you first started like interviewing the drivers of the different, like, I guess, are they called teams? Yeah. So when you were interviewing like the drivers of the different teams, like how would you kind of approach them, or like would you set it up beforehand, or did you have to go through like a publicist or something? Like, because I'm sure they're busy on the day, you can't just like walk up to them and say, "Do you want to do an interview?" Like, how would you kind of get these interviews?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of can. The drifting is pretty low key. It's pretty approachable, which I think is why so many people love it. There were some big name drivers that I tried talking to that just kind of like said no. They were like, "Who are you?" Like, I remember one guy. He said, "Are you just going to ask me the same dumb questions that everyone else does?" And I was like, "Probably." And he did end up giving me an interview. And my dad came with me to a couple of events, and his name's actually Von Gittin, the driver's name, and he's like world famous. And my dad just gave him the most like weird questions and just totally hit him like with a weird side ball that he wasn't expecting after he had said that to us. But most of the drivers were so cool. Most of them, there are still a couple of drivers who I'm really good friends with, and I go to their trailer and I'm like, "Hey, is Frederick around? Is Ryan Turk here?" And one of their like marketing person or something will come up and be like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa! This is their trailer. Like you can't just be coming in here while they're resting." And I'm like, I've known some of these guys for 15 years now, and I'm like, I'm sure it's fine. Don't worry about it. But early on when I was shooting for some of the lesser drivers and stuff, it was pretty easy to just walk around the pits and you'd see somebody and they were pretty happy to be part of something, because most of them didn't have any video content at all. A lot of them, some of them didn't even have Instagram or anything. And I remember one driver specific. His name's Danny George, and he the first thing out of his mouth when we interviewed him was, "I just want to hear my name on the live stream, like on the big, the jumbotron." That's all he wanted, was to get to that point of in the event where they announced his name, because in drifting there were so many drivers that some of them wouldn't even get into the event. They wouldn't qualify high enough to be even part of that. So he wanted to get up into that top 16 upper echelon where they announce your name and you like get to cheer yourself on in front of the audience. And that quote kind of was famous for like a few years.
Yeah, so when you were doing these like little interviews, trying to build out a story, what did you find was kind of working for you in terms of like a storyline, and like what kind of questions were you asking to try and get like the best answers, and like were you constantly kind of like figuring it out and trying new things and trying to aim towards a certain direction?
Yeah, yeah. I think you always want to have like a little element of drama, like something breaking or something being, maybe there's a good guy and a bad guy. So I remember I would always fly to these events, and on the plane I'd be thinking like, what can we do? What element of drama can we add? And with a lot of teams, you don't even need to add anything. Something just breaks, or there's some internal team battle going on with somebody's upset with someone else. And unfortunately, I know the thing I noticed is the more I planned, the more it seemed like things didn't pan out the way I wanted to. So I kind of just got to a point where I would just show up and just start filming whatever was happening, and just kind of going off of that. And those lesser drivers definitely always had a lot of drama with things breaking and stuff like that. And the better higher tier drivers always had that element of good guy, bad guy. Either they were like the good guy that everyone loved, the people's champ or whatever, or they were that bad guy that had a lot of haters and they embraced it, and kind of like thrived on that idea.
Yeah, because you kind of see it with like wrestling, like WWE, like they have the bad character and the good character, and like at the core of it, it's like very kind of primal the way that they like write the storylines. But now you see it kind of cross over into like the UFC or boxing, where they're all trying to hype the fight up and saying ridiculous things. It's kind of getting out of hand. But yeah, if you don't have that, most people, they just want to compete. And I guess there are some like competitive people out there. Like, have you seen like the bodybuilding, like Arnold Schwarzenegger early on, like documentary, like Pumping Iron? Like he's like naturally like kind of competitive person, and makes fun of people. But yeah, to kind of like produce those things, it's kind of a little like manufactured. It's some of those, it's like better to let it happen and try and just like get an honest opinion, or like capture the document what's happening, rather than try to manufacture your own little storylines.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm sure a lot of people know the name Donut Media. I worked for Donut freelance for a couple of years, and I remember they had a lot of meetings with I remember they had a lot of meetings with Formula Drift, and Donut was always telling Formula Drift, you guys need to make this literally professional wrestling. You have to keep pushing to make it like a TV show basically. And Formula Drift was always very like slow to change. So they were kind of like, yeah, I don't know, I don't think so. Maybe we want to be a professional racing series, not a TV show. So I kind of see it from that perspective, but I think it would be a lot of fun to push for more drama and more stories.
Yeah, I think that's what helps, sell it to the like a broader audience. Whereas if it's like just straight down the line professional drifting, like you get like the people that really love cars, but if you bring in like those crazy personalities and storylines, then it's like open to more people. But then yeah, you kind of lose.
I've seen fist fights in NASCAR, and it's pretty entertaining to me.
You mentioned Donut Media. Like, were you filming like for them as well? Like at some point, like, and you probably still do projects till this day. Like I've seen you do stuff with the race service and like what kind of projects were you doing? You mentioned like the Hanok tires. How did it progress from there?
Yeah, so oddly enough, I guess drifting is such a big piece of at the beginning of my career because everybody that I associated with basically came from drifting. And the two of the co-founders of Donut Media were producers that were working with drivers in drift. The one of the guys who was like my best friend throughout the whole kind of like the drifting thing, we would always shoot together. He became, I think he's like the COO of Donut now, and we were both just like shooter editors. And so Donut was kind of comprised of all these guys that came from this kind of like action motorsports background, and we all kind of brought our clientele and networks together. And these guys formed Donut Media, and I pretty much worked there in the very beginning for like the first 3 years. I've always been kind of been remote because I live in Portland and Donut's based in LA, but they would always fly me down for all these fun different shoots. And um, we pretty much would do we did some commercial shoots, things like for Ford and Kia and things like that. And that's probably some of the more commercial stuff I've ever done. Was it was kind of like car ads, but it was more fun stuff that was YouTube based. And some of the really cool things were like big monster sponsored YouTube videos and things like that. But the guys from Donut ended up starting race service, and so those two original uh, producers, Jacob and James, they're the co-founders of race service. So they kind of split off and did their own thing.
And then who was the guy that you were like filming with that became like worked for Donut?
Jesse Wood was a longtime friend of mine through Drift, and he came on with Donut as basically like their only shooter editor that was full time. And since then, I think it's been 6 or 7 years now, he's brought in like dozens of shooter editor type people and has kind of like raised each and every one of them to be part of the Donut family, and got them in kind of on the ground floor with some of the talent on there, like James Pumphrey and Nolan, that were kind of there from the beginning as the hosts of some of those shows. And it seems like they're doing pretty good. They're still having a good time doing a lot of their fun YouTube stuff. And I'm not as part of it so much now because they're doing pretty much everything in house, which is definitely the way to do it for financial reasons and also just like communicating and things like that better. But Jesse and I remain really good friends to this day, so it's always fun to see him or work on a project with him when I get the chance.
Yeah, because I think Donut has kind of exploded. Like they got 8 million subscribers or something, and like a lot of their videos get like millions of views. So they kind of like figured out like the audience and what people like, I guess, in terms of keeping people watching and like the craziness of it.
Yeah, I remember being there. I think it was when we hit a million. It might not have been, might have been 100,000, but I remember sitting there in the office with them at like 2 in the morning, and we were all like drinking beers and like watching the little counter thing on YouTube, and it was like 99998, and we're just like sitting there waiting, like, come on, and they're all posting about it on their stories. If you know anyone who's not a follower, I think it was 250,000. So it was pretty early on. If you know anyone who's not a follower, text them right now. Tell them to go follow Donut Media so we can hit this 250,000. And within, a matter of 10 minutes, like we were over that. But um, it's funny to talk to some of the younger generation who aspire to be like influencers or have a channel like Donut, because a lot of them were like, wow, that guy James Pumphrey, like that's amazing. He just built that whole entire, YouTube channel. Just they got so many followers so fast. And I'm like, James is definitely a big part of why Donut is what it is today. But there is literally a group of 15 people behind the scenes that you don't even know about that are having meetings every single day. What is the YouTube algorithm doing? What are we doing? Who's working on what thing? Like, James is a really good writer and host, but yeah, there's got to be all these other things going on, and the like CEO of the company, was bringing in a couple $1 million to fund all this stuff, to fund all of us shooting all this stuff, because in the beginning we weren't making nearly enough money to keep the ball rolling just from like the YouTube monetization and things like that.
Yeah, it's a tricky business. Like especially with YouTube, it's kind of like a personal brand. Like you need a face of, like a face of Donut, and I guess that's what people gravitate towards and think that it's just his channel. Like he's the host. It must be him. But yeah, there's like a big machine behind most of these things. Like the smaller channels that like have crazy like followers, it's pretty incredible what they're able to achieve with just like a camera and themselves, like vlogging, like Casey Neistat or something, like kind of started that. But it's like a lot of work to vlog every single day, and figure out different storylines, and yeah, constantly.
These the producers from Donut, they came from, I mean, one guy came from GoPro, worked at GoPro since the very beginning of GoPro. The other guy came from a family that had decades and decades of racing, like family racing heritage, where his grandfather was racing motorcycles and doing things. And the CEO of Donut actually worked at Hoonigan from the beginning of Hoonigan, and he was a split off from Hoonigan. So it was not these guys' first rodeo by any means.
Yeah, you kind of see it with like all different kind of, filmmakers, like where they learned their craft or how they figured it out. And you can kind of like trace it back. That's why I like doing these podcasts to figure out like, where did you start? Like, where did you grow up? Where did you come from? Like, how did you get to where you are? So yeah, like there's a lot of other people before us that have figured it out. So it's good to kind of look back in time and say, how did they do that? And then you can hopefully learn from what they've done. Sometimes you learn from your mistakes. Like, have you made many mistakes while you were filming? Like, I've seen you mentioned GoPro. Like, I've seen you like strapping GoPros on all the cars and stuff. And I'm sure you've lost a few or forgotten. Like, I saw a video where you said, when you forget where you put the GoPro, like, have you had many like mishaps or like lost any cameras or crashes, that kind of thing?
Yeah. I mean, there's been plenty. Uh, you always have to look at the GoPros being very like expendable camera. You don't know if it's going to come back. So every time I see a car return with whatever, all three cameras still suction cup to it, that's always a sigh of relief. But there's been plenty that have been knocked off, hit by things on the cars, hit by cars. But there's the other side of it, that when you see a camera isn't on the car anymore, you get excited because you're like, oh man, I bet that thing has some sick footage on it. I remember in one of the drift events, a car came back with no camera, and I knew exactly where it was. And the footage happened to be like the car coming down the track, and right as he initiated into the drift, you just see the cone coming towards the car at like 100 miles an hour, and it just like smack like right into the camera lens, and it was just like such a good, like such a cool cut point to use in the video, and just such an exciting moment, especially when the cars hit each other is pretty cool. But yeah, sometimes I have so many GoPros out there on track during like Formula Drift practice that you can't remember what camera's on whose. I mean, some driver disappears to the pit somewhere, and you're like looking for forever, trying to remember where the thing was stuck onto.
Yeah, so basically, you mentioned you started on the 5D. Maybe we can talk a little bit about equipment. Like now you're using like the red. Like how did you kind of go from the 5D up until the red? Like were you working on these projects, slowly getting a bit more money and like deciding, "Oh, okay, I got to invest in some better gear," or like how did that kind of figure itself out?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, the 5D was a fantastic camera. I really loved that thing. And from there, I moved on to an FS700, like a Sony camera that shoots slow-mo. And that was really cool. And then they started releasing like the A7 line of cameras by Sony. And what was so great about those is you could basically record like the 4K picture out of the camera onto a device called a Shogun. So you were recording like a ProRes version of that footage, and I just remember doing that for the first few times and how beautiful it was, and I was kind of hooked. It was the first time I really noticed like the differences in quality between my lenses. And so from there, I wanted to buy some more expensive lenses, and the A7Ss were really great cameras. Um, but for some reason, I was never quite satisfied. I'm kind of like nerdy and love to like tinker with things, and I just thought that the next step would be a red, and it was a pretty big step. Because not only was it like $35,000, $40,000 camera, but it was a much heavier camera. There was no autofocus. The battery draw is astronomical, so you're having to worry about all these other things, keeping batteries charged, and the media was huge. It was my first red was a helium, and that shoots 8K. And of course, you always want to shoot like really high resolution, so that you can get like the entire image that the camera is capable of. And so it was definitely a learning experience, how to edit that footage, how to get that camera to work on a gimbal, just everything. How many batteries, how many of these $300 batteries I was going to have to buy to get through just one day shooting at an event. And it was a big setback, maybe more of a setback than it was ahead, because clients were just like, okay, like what does this camera do, like what's so great about it, like am I gonna have to pay you more, like whatever. And I remember a friend of mine, he said, don't up your day rate, just keep shooting, the same for the same amount of money, and the bigger better clients will come when they see that you have a red, and they'll wanna hire you more. And I don't think that very often have I gotten a gig just because of the red. But I definitely think it helped with like job security. When somebody else would try to pitch something to one of my clients and like undercut me or something, the client would just be like, "Well, I already like this guy's video and he shoots on red, so like we already have everything we need." And so that helped out a lot. But it took a couple of years to really get familiar with that camera, and they're better cameras now. The Komodo was the next camera I had, and that was fun because I kept the other red, so I had two reds, and I could shoot with one on a gimbal, one on a tripod, and switch back and forward really fast. And then I recently just replaced my helium that I had had for 5 years with the Red Raptor, which is just like their most badass camera they've ever made, and that thing is sick. It's they have literally fixed every single problem, and they've made the camera 10 times more powerful. So I'm in love with that thing. It's a dream to shoot on. Everything that comes off of it looks insane.
Sweet. And so, where were these kind of projects that you were working on? I know you were doing stuff for your YouTube. Was there a point where you decided, like, I'm going to stop uploading to YouTube And just because I can see on your YouTube, like you haven't uploaded for a few years. So it says 3 years ago was like were you kind of just like putting stuff on there, like you wanted to grow the channel, and then you decided like it's too much work, or like you weren't getting paid enough, or you're just giving the projects to your clients, and that's how it was working out?
Mhm. Yeah, so I would say a lot of different things happened. So in the beginning, yeah, I just needed a place to put videos, obviously, and so that's what I was doing. I built like a small following pretty quickly, and actually, some of the drivers that I shot for didn't even have like a YouTube channel or a following. So some of them were like, "Let's just put it on your YouTube, and you can get the views." And if it's monetized and you get money from that, then keep it, but it'll be free publicity for them, and helped me populate my channel with as much stuff as possible. But the problem that eventually happened was the big one was I was just getting too busy shooting all the time that I couldn't really shoot anything for myself. And then also a lot of the things that I was shooting being for clients ended up being um, like they had the rights to it or whatever, so I couldn't upload the video to my own channel because it had to go to their channel, and I didn't want to take the air out of their sales type stuff. But yeah, now a lot of the things is for such big clients. Like I would never be allowed to do that to post it on my own channel.
Yeah, so do you want to like talk about like the different clients that you've kind of worked for or with along the journey?
Yeah. So working with Donut Media was kind of like opening the first door to working with some really cool clients. They had some pretty cool things going on with Ford and some other car manufacturers, and they would just kind of ask us like, what would be cool, and the producers would say, okay, let's just get a drift driver, and we'll go drive this Mustang somewhere and drift it. And then when those producers split off and started race service, that's when I definitely started to get to shoot some really really cool, amazing things. We started working with F1 about 4 years ago, and it's been an insane experience shooting stuff for F1. We've shot for the actual like racing, like FIA basically, and transitioned that into working with a lot of the teams, and then transitioned that into working with a lot of sponsors. And it's turned out that the sponsors are the easiest and the funnest to work with, but it's been quite a mind-blowing experience that I've been fortunate enough to do a lot of that stuff. And yeah, race service made a lot of that possible, luckily. But we shot for 2 years with F1 and got to do that entire opening the opening scene to Drive to Survive, where all 20 drivers are standing together. It was the first time that F1 had ever brought all 20 drivers to the same exact place in one spot, and I got to shoot that. That was basically me shooting that whole thing with all of them, and it was quite the experience, quite nerve wracking, but pretty cool.
Yeah, so was that in a different country? What was it like? Like, were you traveling to different areas? Like, just talk a little bit about like what it's like to kind of go on these different shoots.
Yeah, so I remember the race service guys, they called me and they were like, "You want to go to Spain?" And I was like, "Yeah, sounds good." So, we pack up a whole bunch of camera stuff, and it's always a little bit of a headache flying internationally with expensive gear. And I'm not so much worried of it getting stolen, but the airports can be difficult. Some countries don't like you bringing cameras there. But we got to Spain, and that was the first thing that happened. Somebody stole a bunch of our crap. We were literally standing outside of our Airbnb trying to check in, and somebody stole like three of our backpacks. And luckily for me, it wasn't any of my stuff, but we had laptops missing, drones missing, and so we had to backpedal a little bit to fix all that. But we went to the track at F1. And they told me what we were shooting, that we were going to bring all the drivers together, and we ended up interviewing all 20 drivers for their website bios as well, which is cool. So we got to meet every single driver like face to face and film in their garage. But there's always like kind of an interesting feeling of insecurity when you're flying internationally. And I worked for a client for 2 or 3 years in Japan, and that was quite the interesting experience because that Japan is so different. It's like being on the moon when you're there. You get off the plane and everything's written, in a crazy looking language, and kind of have no idea what you're doing. Fortunately, the people in Japan are so nice. Someone's always happy to help you. But I was lucky that one of our, producers or assistant producers would pick me up in a car and drive me around and show me where we were going, and booked my hotels for me a lot of times. So that helps. I'm definitely the type who's more on the creative end of things, that wants to just show up with the camera and create something, rather than the guy that's making all the phone calls, booking things, planning things. Because like we said earlier, there's so much that goes into a lot of this, and the months and months of planning. Some of this stuff is insane. What goes behind it.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's a lot of politics involved too. It's not fun to figure out, like especially all those logistics, and then when you people don't want you there, it's kind of hard because you have to compete with other companies. Like I guess in the F1, it's like super locked down as well. So yeah, to get that access, and then I'm sure, like they said, you've got however many half an hour to film this thing, and you kind of like at the rush. Did you do much like pre-production in terms of like how are we going to do this? Like, what's the plan?
Yeah, so I wasn't really part of a lot of the pre-planning of how we were going to get all the drivers together. But when we got to Spain, it was during the 2 weeks of practice that F1 does before the season starts. We got there a couple days early, which is also always a good idea, because a lot of times, the airport misplaces stuff, and I've had quite a few jobs where, a $10,000 gimbal setup didn't show up, and fortunately, it's always arrived eventually. But we we would always go and pre-plan the shoot, like in a parking lot. So we would just like walk down the street from the hotel and find like a vacant area, and would have stickers or just tape with the drivers' names written on them, and string, and we would like string the whole thing out, and have people kind of like standing around there, acting like they were the drivers, and I would like get the camera rolling, and we would just shoot a couple things of like some of us pretending to do what they were going to do, and kind of getting a real visual of what it was gonna look like. Um, and yeah, like a lot of the hoops that you're jumping through with the clients are always can be more or less tedious. F1 is mainly run by a bunch of British people, and I think for the most part, British people kind of have a mentality of like following the rules and like queuing up and doing those kinds of things. And Americans have that more like gun ho, like I'm gonna break the rules and be different, and no one's gonna tell me no. And when we got there and started working with them, that kind of clashed a little bit, because we were like, oh, we're working for Formula One, like we have the God pass to do anything, and we're telling F1 like, hey, we need Lewis Hamilton to be here at whatever 10:30 for the interview, and they're like, oh, no, his publicist said that's probably not going to work out. And we're like, what do you mean? Like, you're Formula One. You tell him when to be here, or else, like it's like the F1 was scared to push too many of the teams around too much. But then on the flip side, when we started working for the teams, it was very apparent too that the teams were extremely scared of F1, doing anything like finding them or anything, whatever they could do. I've heard some pretty funny stories about people who've pushed back, and there's some interesting things that have happened. I know for sure Red Bull had you're not really allowed to shoot with professional cameras in the pit if you're a team. You have to use like a cell phone or whatever. And one day Red Bull just showed up with like three professional filmmakers with like Aries and Red cameras, and just started shooting a Red Bull commercial. And F1 said, what are you doing? You're insane. You can't do that. And they were like, okay, that's fine. That's fine that we can't do that, but we're still gonna do it. And they were like, well, well, we're going to fine you. And the producer that was there for Red Bull just said, cool, how much is it? Like, just let me know. And I think they got fined like 50,000 a day. So they just added $150,000 to the budget and just paid it. And they just continued to shoot. They didn't care.
What do you call it? Like you shoot first, ask questions later, or
Ask for
like
forgiveness. Yeah,
yeah,
ask for forgiveness.
yeah, shoot it and then yeah, ask for forgiveness later. That seems to be like I've filmed a few documentaries and to get like access to like a concert through a stadium and then it's like it's a union only job. It's like it's easier just to turn up and walk in and then figure it out later. Sometimes you can't even use the footage and it was a waste of time, but at least you got the footage and at least you can try and get something rather than getting shut down and trying to like get through all the red tape.
Oh yeah, yeah. I definitely take that mentality whenever there's a drone involved in a shoot, and someone's like, "Hey, should we, ask for permits or whatever?" Blah blah. And I'm just like, "This isn't like a big commercial shoot. Let's just go out and do it." And if somebody catches us, we'll definitely ask for forgiveness or whatever it is. But I don't think you're gonna get thrown in jail for the most part. I know everyone hates drones, like why I kind of try not to fly them as often as possible. But that's definitely the mentality we take is it's better to just ask for forgiveness than that. But it's also got me in trouble quite a few times.
Yeah, I think I seen on Instagram one guy, I think it's Tyler, his name, and he was filming in Germany or something. It was over like a military base, and he got arrested, and it was like it was all on his story, like getting arrested, and it's like don't fly drones in military base. I was like, oh, so yeah, there are times where you maybe could get in trouble, but yeah, for the most part.
That's part of the reason they want you to take that 107 license certification, because in that test they tell you all that stuff. Like here's what you kind of can't do. Here's times you should be careful, and here's times you should just never ever fly over this property or whatever. If it says this on a map, like don't even.
Yeah, no, it's good that they try to educate people because there was a point in time where drones were kind of a super worry in terms of their voice. They were crashing and causing accidents, and you never knew who owned what. And then they started to lock it down. But now I think the drone that I have is like 249 grams. Like the DJI one is like you don't. It's like you don't need anything. It's like perfect. But
Yeah, I was gonna say I was a really early drone adopter to like flying cameras, and I even was putting like a little like a T2I or something on like a single blade RC helicopter and trying to shoot with some of that stuff. So eventually, I started shooting on drones. Like when the Phantom One came out, when DJI was just like a tiny, tiny little company nobody had heard of, and I kind of like became the drone guy for a little while, and then I started feeling the pressure from all the legality of it and the insurance and everything, and I was like, I don't know, this is too much. So I backed off quite a bit, and I still keep one with me because people ask for it every now and then, but um, try not to if it's something too sketchy.
have you ever seen like the Inspire drones like strapped to the cars to kind of get like the car to car shots? Have you ever tried that? I guess on a drift car or anything, you can control the drone from. That might be interesting.
Yeah, it's funny because I just saw somebody doing that 2 weeks ago at Rensport. They literally had the Inspire attached with the blades and everything, just like hard mounted on a car. And I've heard it works really good. I've seen some videos of guys that were doing it even a few years ago, and it seemed like it was pretty successful. DJI kind of makes some cameras now that are basically the same thing. That's just not a drone. Like they made some cameras and things. I had one that was called the Osmo, and it was a basically just a gimbal with a camera on it, and I hooked that to the back of a car when we shot the Gumball 3000, and we drove like 1,500 miles through Europe with this little tiny gimbal camera thing on the back of a car, and I was just controlling it with a cell phone, and it blew my mind like how easy it was to get a decent shot of one of these guys doing a flyby. But Yeah, it's fun. It's fun to see people kind of doing new inspirational things, and car to car shots are always a difficult thing to get. It takes a lot of planning and got to be really careful with things. And there's so many little things part of it that are just like extra stuff, a camera shaking and trying to control the camera and making it look smooth. That's why a lot of times it costs a lot of money to get somebody really professional to shoot something like that.
Yeah, and you mentioned Gumball 3000. What's it like kind of filming like this big moving rally, I guess it's called? Like, what kind of equipment do you have to bring and logistics and kind of covering all the events? And I'm sure there's a lot of, does 3000 mean they drive 3000 miles or what's that?
I think it's 3,000 kilometers, I think.
Kilometers.
But the one that I did was with Larry Chen, and maybe it was 3,000 miles. We went from Latvia all the way down to the Greek Mykonos Islands. So it was pretty far. It might have been 3,000 miles. And I don't like shooting rallies. I've always told people that it's like one of my least favorite things to do, and mainly because it's really hard to get good shots. I remember some of the Volkswagen car shows or something that I would go to back when I was younger. Some of them would be part of like a cruise where a bunch of guys would meet up somewhere and then they would drive for a couple hours before going to the show. And I remember trying to follow some of those, and it was just such a pain in the butt. Like people flying by, and you were always behind the ball. It seemed like missing the shot that you wanted, and then going on the gumball was quite a fun experience. People are mainly there to be shown and to show off. So a lot of those guys wanted to be filmed, and once they realized who I was, and some of them knew Larry Chen, they were super happy to be part of our video. And we we just rented this like minivan, and we were working for a Japanese client who was driving like one of the first ever LC 500s, and kind of following his story. But then he also wanted us to follow the full story of Gumball and everything that was happening there, so that they could put it on their YouTube channel. And it was a really fun time because it was just so insane. But you definitely had to prepare yourself for things being thrown around, camera equipment just getting tossed in the van at the moment's notice, and it's a really easy way to break things. And definitely I've done that a couple times. But it's this fleeting, never-ending feeling that you're not quite caught up with everyone, especially when these guys are driving, Lamborghinis and things that are going 200 miles an hour. And it can be pretty frustrating to try to make something out of all that.
Yes, because like if you're shooting on like a gimbal and the gimbal kind of breaks and you have to stop and then fix it and then it's like everyone's taken off, you're like, damn it, mixed. It's like hard to get the shots, I guess.
Yeah, that's 100% the thing. And I mentioned that DJI Osmo that I had like suction cup to the back of the car, and sometimes we're like rushing, getting inside the van, and the thing's not connecting, and you're doing like 100 miles an hour trying to catch these guys, and you're like crawling around in the van trying to get it situated, or holding your hand out the window trying to like turn on a camera, or hit the reset button so that you can connect to it or whatever, even if it's just the record button. And we love minivans because you can like open the sliding door and shoot out the side is so nice. And then obviously the back as well works so good. But I just remember, like rolling up next to these like Ferraris or something, and the van door just comes sliding open like super hard because we're doing like 80. The thing like slams open, and I'm just sitting there with the gimbal, like, oh, trying to film them. And these fry guys are like, "What's up?" Just go flying off like in a cloud of dust, and then, oh shit, cop, 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 and like slamming the door closed. So it's definitely a fun time. And you kind of learn what works and what doesn't. And yeah, it was a really good bonding experience with Larry Chen as well. We shared hotel rooms the whole entire trip, and we just had an amazing time.
Yeah, Larry's been doing it for a long time, and I've seen follow him on Instagram, and the amount of like photos and events that he does, it's kind of like mind-boggling how much stuff he covers throughout the years.
Yeah, he just is nonstop. He's wild. He actually used to be a paparazzi. and was shooting in LA, like shooting celebrities and stuff for basically just selling photos to magazines. And I remember when we were on the Gumball 3000, the last day when we got to the Mykonos Islands, Lindsay Lohan was there, and he was like, "Oh no, Lindsay hates me. She's gonna like, hope she doesn't say something and get us kicked out or something like that." And I was like, "Oh, this is hilarious." And she was like totally wasted, didn't even care.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, because the paparazzi like mentality of like let's just capture like this celebrity coming out. I kind of find it similar to yeah shooting events or like automotive stuff because you kind of have to kind of figure out all these logistics of like where's the car gonna come from, where's it gonna leave, like where should I be, where should and then like finding out like the little information of like asking the doorman like when's the celebrity gonna like so you can kind of see the correlations of like paparazzi and then I guess yeah like the going from paparazzi to shooting these events like I'm sure it's good for him because the paparazzi is kind of like don't film me and then the opposite like with the gumball it's like yeah take your pictures so yeah.
Larry told me stories of him like hiding in trash cans for like 3 hours and like popping out, doing stuff like that. Yeah. Yeah, you definitely I guess it was a whole nother lifestyle that most people don't even know about, you know.
Because that's super interesting like to get like we were talking about like the backgrounds of people like the work ethic to be a paparazzi you kind of need to have like a whole other mentality of like when people say stop filming you kind of like okay I'll stop filming but if you're a paparazzi it's like I'm never gonna stop I'm gonna film whatever I have to.
Yeah, 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 exactly. And I definitely kind of joke around with Larry nowadays too. I'm like, you're not really a photographer, man. You're like a businessman. Like everything you do is business focused, you know, and sometimes I feel like the photos come later, but it's really just a big story that he's telling, I think. And an amazing photo will live on forever, but in this dawn of social media and stuff, it's kind of just like capture something in the moment and move on. So
Yeah, like it's kind of disappointing when you like yeah, everything's kind of just scroll and nobody ever scrolls back to see what else you've done. They might go like 50 things and then that's kind of the cutoff. But you mentioned like Larry Chen and did you meet him at the Formula Drift and then like you kind of built up these relationships just from everybody else around that kind of area?
yeah, yeah, that was exactly it. Is I sort of knew him through Formula Drift, and when the Japanese guys were like, "Oh yeah, we're gonna have Larry shoot it with you," and I'm like, "Okay, okay, that's cool." And then they were like, "Yeah, and he's gonna share a room with you, and you guys are gonna be in a rental car together with a driver, and you guys are basically gonna be together nonstop for the next like 10 days." I was like, "All right, cool." And luckily we really hit it off because it was a good time, and fortunately Larry was a little bit of a prima donna about the whole thing and was upset that the hotel rooms that they had booked us were pretty crappy. And I mean we're like in the middle of nowhere, sometimes like in Poland, that the client gave us their hotel rooms that came pre-booked with the Gumball like $50,000 ticket to be part of the Gumball rally. So we ended up staying in the client's like $1,000 a night hotel rooms throughout the entire trip, and that made the experience pretty nice. But that cracked me up because I didn't really realize it, and Larry's like, "Oh yeah, yeah, I told them I was pissed because our last hotel room didn't have air conditioning, and so the client, who was actually a pretty nice guy, just ended up staying in our crappy ones that he had booked us."
That's I guess that's part of like doing these events or like working for companies. You kind of experience where to push and how you can kind of leverage in terms of like negotiating terms and agreements and getting more money and like yeah, you want to be comfortable, especially if you have to film all day. You don't want to be like not getting no sleep and I guess that helps to kind of negotiate and get what you need.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. That's part of the business I don't really like to do, you know. Like I said, I'm more the person that I want to go out there and shoot it. But as you get older, you know, you get um threshold for dealing with BS or being uncomfortable gets less and less. And obviously, I'm not going to go shoot something nowadays if I have to sleep on somebody's couch for like 4 days, or if there's no comfortabilities, if there's not going to be food or something like that. Because I remember back in the day, like, man, we would just go out there with no plan sometimes and be staying in a hotel room with like 7 people and like sharing, a couple of pizzas, like sitting on the floor of the hotel room. That was it.
Yeah, and I guess it comes with experience, like figuring out like the kind of checklist. I know with like musicians, they'll have like a rider of all the different things that they want to have in their green room, like certain drink or a certain snack, but also like the hotel room has to be a certain way and a certain like transport. Like they want a limousine to get to the venue, so it's like a private jet to fly them out to these places. And you see the promoters spending like millions of dollars just to get them there, and it's like,
I don't remember who it was, but it was one of the celebrities I've worked with, and they were pissed because the town car we sent wasn't black. And the dude was like super pissed about it. And I remember it being a whole thing. I don't remember who it was, but just little
yeah,
things
I
like
think
that is a good example.
yeah, I think it's kind of like a power struggle because so many people like have experienced getting like screwed over in their careers, that even those little battles of like, I want like a black car, it's like once they get that, then like, okay, what else can I ask for? And it's kind of like, yeah, the ego gets bigger and bigger, and some things can kind of get out of control, and you kind of
Yeah,
wonder.
you kind of like, what can I get away with? And maybe you're not expecting for it to actually happen, but then it does. And you're like, oh, okay, maybe this is just the standard of how I'm gonna be.
Are there any, like you talked about F1, Gumball, are there any other kind of projects that you would like to talk about, like mention, like you've kind of built up over time? Like what have you been working on recently?
I mean, definitely a project I think would be worth talking about is when I did another one I did with race service in the Faroe Islands. It's an island that's like somewhere in between kind of England and Iceland. There's like 25,000 people that live there, and they basically gave us pretty much carte blanche to go on the island and drift an electric car for a week straight. So we went out there with Von Gittin, and the whole thing was sponsored by Monster and Ford Performance. And it was a really good example of like a bunch of good friends going out with expensive cameras and just getting to be ultra creative. We had an extremely talented like FPV drone operator, and I mean, I think there was like 4 or 5 red shooters out there, that all guys that I'd known forever, and it was a really cool storyline. I'll have to send you the link, but there's a pretty good behind the scenes video, about a 45-minute PTS video of everything that we went through on the shoot. And Vaughn actually ended up crashing the car pretty bad, nearly disabling it on the very first day of shooting. And so it's a pretty fun story of how they fixed that, and how we still managed to make a film out of the whole thing on an island where there's no resources. Basically, we were flying headlights in from 4,000 miles away, and having some like random guy at a body shop that's barely ever even seen a car like that, like fixing the fiberglass, and some vinyl dude like cutting us custom stickers and everything just to fix the car. We had to make like a fake headlight out of a piece of metal, and took one of Larry Chen's pictures and printed it out, and so the headlight looked like a real headlight on the video, but it's actually a sticker for some of it.
Yeah, I think I might have seen that one. It's kind of like Gymkhana kind of yeah, vibes. Yeah. So so talk about like a little bit about like I know we talked about early on, but what about as you were growing up? Like were you watching other drifting videos like Hoonigans, like Gymkhanas, all those kind of Top Gear TV shows? Like what were you kind of like consuming as you were like getting into this automotive world of like, I want to make automotive films? What kind of films were you watching to get inspired? Was there any like Hollywood film, action film? Like how were you kind of getting ideas for different ways to film cars?
Yeah, I was definitely growing up in that era of like Fast and Furious, of course. So those are some pretty cool movies to be a part of when I was in middle school or high school to see that stuff to live through the era of that. And I would definitely say you named a lot of the good ones. Yeah, Jim Connor was definitely something pretty cool, something pretty inspiring, and is cool too, just to be friends with a lot of the people that were on those videos and producing them. And yeah, Top Gear. I'm a big Top Gear fan, so getting to watch all that was definitely you know a nice way to pass time. I love those videos, and still a fan of what all the guys are doing. Jeremy Clarkson and all those guys are still very entertaining people. But yeah, for the most part, I definitely consumed like a lot of YouTube stuff and watching guys working on their cars and things like that. Setting up cameras too, because it's kind of like this like weird mixture where you're trying to build car stuff, but also trying to figure out like what's the next cool thing that you can do with a camera that no one else has done before. And it feels a little bit nowadays like everything's been done for the most part, but um, yeah, it's always trying to think of some idea out there that maybe someone's never done. And the Faroe Island thing is kind of a good example. One of our camera operators actually sat on the rear windowsill of the car, and we had him strapped in with a harness, and he was filming with the red from the outside of the car while the driver was drifting it. Like he was literally sitting on the windowsill, and that was like something wild that I had never seen before because it was like a handheld angle of the camera, but it was on the car. So that was like totally insane, totally wild. Um, so yeah, stuff like that for sure. I think I've probably seen most of the automotive films and things like that that are out there.
And so, like through this whole time period, like you mentioned, you don't like rallies because they're a bit out of control. Like, you've done lots of events, like, and then what kind of like jobs were you most like? You mentioned the island one where it's like, but then things can go wrong because he crashes and then it's kind of like out of your hands again. Like, what kind of shoots have you kind of enjoyed the most throughout your career? And what would you want to do more of in the future?
Yeah, I've gotten this question from a few people, and so I never really know what to say with what I want to do in the future. But I definitely think there have been a handful of moments in my career where you're just somewhere in the middle of nowhere with a bunch of friends, and you're like creating something beautiful and just like getting paid for it and having the time of your life. And the more often I can do that and get paid for it, and that I think the happier that'll make me for sure. So anything that involves getting to shoot something with a lot of creative people where the vibe, is laid back and things like that. That's why I don't like to shoot a lot of like really commercial stuff. Is always my favorite for sure. One that sticks out of my head was a Maxxis tire commercial that couple friends of mine shot in. We were in Spain, like along the coast, and they flew me out there, and like one of my friends, and I was a really good friend with the producer director, and we basically just had like a black arm on a car and just shot car to car shots of these really sick motorcycles along the coast of Spain for like 5 days. And that it was just so much fun. The camaraderie and like the chill, laid back mentality of the whole thing was so awesome. The client was just so easy to deal with, and I had that moment where I was like, if I could just keep doing this for the rest of my life, it'll be perfect. So with Race Service, we've been partnering with some more of the sponsors from Formula One. One in particular that's been a lot of fun is EA Games, and so they've been having us shoot a lot of stuff with the drivers playing the video games, which has been like a really fun opportunity to get to know the drivers really well because it's in like a chill environment where they're not rushed away from the race. So gotten to know like Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen pretty well. Is pretty fun thing to do, and I'm still very much involved like in the drifting community, shooting Formula Drift a lot still, and I'll be going to one of the events called Grid Life in a few days to shoot Grid Life, which will just be like a cool fun thing. But it's the at the end of the year is kind of starting to wind down a little bit, and it's a nice, relaxing kind of relief to know that I'll start to have some, some free time to hang out with my family a little bit more and work on my cars. I'm always wanting to wrench on my cars, but yeah, you never know what the next year will hold. There's always something crazy that pops up, and yeah, we'll see.
But so yeah, thanks so much, Lauren, for talking with us. It's been awesome. You've told us some great stuff, but just as a last thought, do you have any advice for somebody who wants to get into like automotive filmmaking and kind of just steps in terms of what they can do to kind of progress and get to like further in their career?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what I would say will help your career path as a filmmaker is but I think the biggest thing is just be easy to deal with, be easy to work with. If a client's got an ask, don't be abrasive about it, even if it's something extra. Try your best to go that extra mile and over deliver. You know, always be on time. I'm like the most punctual person ever. I'm always trying to make sure I get there at the exact time they asked me. It's a big one. And then I mean definitely be persistent with people, be persistent with your work. Just try to be creating as much as you possibly can, and find something that you really like to do, because it'll be impossible for your excitement to not translate through the camera. It'll definitely show, and it's probably why I'm still shooting race cars, because I love race cars. So
Yeah, and I guess like a big part of it is kind of like that meeting people and talking and like building that like network, because from like the stories you've told, a lot of it's come from people and kind of meeting people along the way. So what kind of advice do you have for like first off meeting new people and kind of maintaining those kind of relationships over time?
yeah, I mean, I've been in this industry for 15 years, and I still get nervous, going and meeting new people, working with a client for the first time that I've never met before, and it can be scary, flying halfway across the world, and you just show up, and you don't know who this race car driver is going to be that you're going to interview, or you don't know what the client's going to be like, or if you're going to have to stay in a hotel room with Larry Chen for 10 days straight. But yeah, just try to be nice to everyone, and clients are going to want to keep coming back to you if you're friends with them. You don't got to be their best friend, but if you have some type of camaraderie together, and enjoy each other's company, like I find that I can kind of get along with anyone. That'll go just as far as being a good filmmaker or photographer. Anything like that is kind of having that positive relationship with somebody and enjoying your time together.